In the quiet suburban town of Willowbrook, there lived a man named Mr. White. He was an unassuming figure, with graying hair and tired eyes that spoke of years of silent battles. Yet, despite his unremarkable appearance, Mr. White harbored a dark secret, a habit that clung to him like a shadow, threatening to consume him whole. Mr. White was a chain smoker. It was a habit he had acquired in his youth, a misguided attempt to fit into a world that often seemed too daunting to navigate without a crutch. At first it was just a cigarette here and there, a momentary escape from the pressures of everyday life. But as the years passed, the habit grew stronger, weaving its tendrils around Mr. White's life until he could scarcely remember a time when he didn't depend on the thin wisp of smoke to get him through the day. His addiction had taken its toll. Mr. White found himself increasingly isolated, unable to enjoy simple pleasures like taking walks in the crisp morning air or playing with his grandchildren without succumbing to fits of coughing. Each breath was a struggle, each inhale a painful reminder of the damage he had wrought upon himself. Despite his awareness of the toll his addiction was taking on his health, Mr. White found himself unable to break free from its grip. He made countless attempts to quit, each one ending in failure as he found himself reaching for another pack of cigarettes, promising himself that this time would be different. But the truth was, Mr. White was afraid. Afraid of what life would be like without his constant companion, afraid of facing the world without the shield of smoke to hide behind. So, he continued on his downward spiral, resigned to his fate even as he felt the walls closing in around him. It wasn't until a routine checkup with his doctor that Mr. White's world came crashing down around him. His doctor, a stern yet compassionate man, had long warned him of the dangers of his habit, but Mr. White had always brushed off his concerns, convinced that he was invincible. But when the results of his X-ray came back, there was no denying the truth. A tumor, malignant and insidious, had taken root in Mr. White's left lung, a cruel reminder of the consequences of his addiction. Cancer, dirt. The word hung heavy in the air, suffocating him with its implications. For Mr. White, the diagnosis was a wake-up call, a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of taking control of one's destiny. He knew that if he didn't change his ways now, he might never get another chance. So he made a decision to fight, not just for his own life, but for the chance to reclaim the time he had lost to his addiction. He vowed to quit smoking once and for all, to rid himself of the toxic habit that had plagued him for so long. But old habits die hard, and despite his best intentions, Mr. White found himself struggling to break free from the chains that bound him. The cravings were relentless, a constant reminder of the hold that nicotine had over him. Yet, in the face of adversity, Mr. White persevered. He sought out support groups, surrounded himself with friends and family who encouraged him to stay strong. And slowly, ever so slowly, he began to see a glimmer of hope on the horizon. Months passed, and with each passing day, Mr. White grew stronger. The cravings became less frequent, the coughing less severe. He began to rediscover the simple joys of life, the taste of food, the feel of the sun on his face, as if seeing the world anew for the first time. But just as he dared to believe that he had finally conquered his demons, fate had one final twist in store for him. It was a quiet evening, the sky painted with hues of pink and gold, as Mr. White sat alone on his porch, lost in thought. And then, as if on cue, he felt it, a familiar tug at the corners of his mind, a whisper of temptation that threatened to undo all the progress he had made. Without thinking, his hand reached into his pocket, fingers closing around the familiar shape of a cigarette. But, as he brought it to his lips, something inside him shifted. He remembered the fear in his doctor's eyes, the solemn promise he had made to himself on that fateful day. This would be his last cigarette, not just because he wanted it to be, but because he refused to let his addiction dictate his destiny any longer. And so, with a sense of determination that burned brighter than any flame, Mr. White crushed the cigarette beneath his heel, watching as the embers scattered into the night like stars falling from the sky. It was a small victory, perhaps, but in that moment it felt like the whole world was cheering him on. Years passed, and Mr. White's life took on a new sense of purpose. He became an advocate for smoking cessation, using his own experiences to inspire others to take control of their health and embrace a smoke-free lifestyle. But more than that, he found peace in the quiet moments spent with loved ones, in the laughter of grandchildren running through the yard, in the simple pleasure of breathing in the crisp morning air without coughing. For Mr. White, the journey was far from over, but as he looked back on the path he had traveled, he knew that he had finally found his way out of the darkness and into the light. And in that light he found not just redemption, but the freedom to live life on his own terms.